So we start off with our usual prayer for teacher-student. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunuktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Mastuma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy and vigor. May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace be on. There's a wonderful passage. Since it is generally the time of Durga Puja, and many of our talks have been centered around that theme. Of course, Durga means a fortress, an impenetrable fortress, something that will protect us always if we seek it, if we resort to it. That this is a book on Tantra, Shiva Shakti, essentially. And the most qualified person, most reliable authority to do this is that great scholar and author and High Court judge, Sir John Woodruff. He writes under the name Arthur Avalon. So there are something like 28 chapters in a book going into great detail the relationship between Shiva and Shakti in the language of the Tantrikas. That means Shiva represents the ultimate, the absolute. We call this in Vedanta Brahman. Then we have this Shakti. And this Shakti, this great, great energy, this great power, is this primordial world or universe of matter that manifests itself using its own energy seemingly. Until you understand that Shiva Shakti are two sides of the same coin. Now he writes there an extra chapter, chapter 1, which is very interesting. And he writes very beautifully. He says in a very matter-of-fact way, a friend of mine who read the first edition of this book suggested that I should add to it an opening chapter, stating the most general and fundamental principles of the subject as a guide to the understanding what follows, together with an outline of the latter in which the relation of the several parts should be shown. He says, I have not at the present time, nor in the present book, the space to give effect to his wishes and so on. Then he makes a very useful comment. It's a comment that we always have to bear in mind in the dissemination of the Vedanta philosophy in Ireland and in the Western world in general. Why Ireland? Ireland in particular, because culturally, historically, there has really only been one traditional and cultural aspect of religion, and that is Roman Catholicism. From the 1850s onwards, it was Roman Catholicism. Of course, it was always there fundamentally. It was ever there, but it was suppressed for about 500 years. Nobody was allowed to practice anything. When I was down in Bantry on one of my, now what is one of my many visits, there was a sign advertising kind of a tourist spot on a tourist trail, indicating a mass table or a stone table, and used for the mass or the puja of the Roman Catholicism that was being banned. So what they did was they looked for flat rocks somewhere, and the community in secret, for fear of persecution, gathered around it. And so that was made sacred. And so with that cultural background, how to disseminate a philosophy of Hinduism, that's all one thing, that's fine, that's not a bad thing. But how do you go into an understanding of other traditional faiths, such as Hinduism? Right now, because of international affairs, people are learning to study more about Islam. And Judaism has been in Ireland traditionally for a number of years, actually. And the Protestant variety, of course, has also been there, Christianity. But beyond that scope, what is there? When I was in Bantry, because close to Bantry is a Buddhist center, Rinpoche center, and Rigpa, I should say, Rigpa center. Rigpa is an organization, Buddhist organization. So they have a Dzogchen center, meditation center. We're thinking maybe next year of holding a 7-day retreat there. But you see, Buddhism is acceptable. Everybody thought I was a Buddhist monk. Actually, remarkably, in Dublin, people think I belong to the ISKCON movement and then get puzzled. You see, we never saw an ISKCON man with a beard. But down in Bantry, where they're familiar with Buddhists, they automatically assumed I was a Buddhist. Then the question gets asked, are you a Buddhist? The expectation is for me to say yes, but I can't say it. So I have to say, no, I'm a Vedantin. And you can immediately see the look of puzzlement over people's faces. So our job is, how can we disseminate the philosophy of Vedanta so that the term itself becomes recognized as much as Buddhism? And Buddhism is acceptable because it's simple. Hinduism, on the other hand, is seen to be very complex. And even in Sir John Woodruff's day, it was put like that. So in this book, he says, to the Western, Indian religion generally seems a jungle of contradictory beliefs amidst which is lost. Only those who have understood its main principles can show them the path. Now on Friday, I have a podcast, an interview on what is Hinduism. And even when Hindus come to visit this ashram, I try and get them to understand the fundamental principles on which most Hindus agree. Because when a child is sent to school, a Hindu child, he will be asked, more than likely, we believe in, and they'll state their religion. We are Christians, you're a Hindu, what do you believe in? And the Hindus themselves fundamentally understand, but they also get confused. And because they're not familiar with the scriptures, the real essentials for scriptures, which are there in the Vedanta, they have no idea what to answer. They shrug their shoulders and say, it's just a way of life. To which, if I was a Christian, I would say, oh, I see, just like us then. Because every religion should be a way of life, isn't it? What makes yours special? So, in an effort to address this, Arthur Avalon, or Sir John Woodruff, says, it has been asserted that there is no such thing as Indian religion, though there are many religions in India. This is not so. And he says, as I have already pointed out in a previous text or chapter in Is India Civilized, I say a book, there is a common Indian religion which I have called Bharata Dharma, which is an Aryan religion, Arya Dharma, held by all Aryas, whether Brahmanic, Buddhist, or Jain. So he's using the colonial terms for Hinduism, the Brahmanic religion, but he's also using this term Aryan religion. But Arya simply means, of course, a noble person. It's come to be distorted as a race of being, but it is simply an adjective. It cannot really be transferred as a noun. So what we can characterize it as a certain set of beliefs that is different from the Semitic roots of religion that we find in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And also Baha'ism. The Baha'is always get left out, but that is a more recent version of this Abrahamic religions, which we can characterize in this sense as Semitic. These, he says, are the three main divisions of this Bharata Dharma. That is, the Brahmanic, we can call this Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism. Then he exclude other religions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam. Not that all these are purely Islamic. Christianity came in part Aryans. In other words, Christianity changed its Semitic character or flavor when it became Roman Catholic, or when it became Byzantinian Christianity, because the Byzantines took on the Greek aspect of things, and the Roman Church, divided, of course, on the Roman Empire, divided into two areas, with the Byzantine Empire now being the Eastern Rome. So they adopted the Roman style, and when you look at the Vatican, you'll see all these statues all over the place, which could easily have been misunderstood in Roman times as Roman gods and goddesses, simply adopting the same cultural view, so that the Messiah, a Jewish concept, becomes completely different, becomes something like a descending divine entity, a god, a deity. So he mentions this, and what also happened with Islam when accepted by such Eastern Aryans as the Persians. You can see that the Shiite version of Islam is somehow genetically flavored and spiced with the Persian religions, Zoroastrianism being a good example of it. Thus, Sufism, he puts, is either a form of Vedanta or indebted to it. When we do the Enneagram and trace it back, as people have a tendency to do, to Sufism, having got it from even Gurdjieff, and Gurdjieff having said, no, I have gotten this from the Sufis. The people who, some people who teach the Enneagram, there's Christians who teach the Enneagram, would be proud to say that it has an Abrahamic origin because they say come from the Sufis, not understanding that Sufism is either a form of Vedanta or indebted to it. When you read such works from Ibn Arabi and others, you'll see the connection so strong. And when you see Ghazali and see where did he come from, well, he comes from Iran, which is itself a corruption of the Sanskrit Aryan. So the general Indian religions, he says, or Bharata Dharma, holds that the world is an order or cosmos. It is not a chaos of things being thrown haphazard together, in which there is no binding relations or rule. This is common to all these three aspects, what we call Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism. All of them hold this principle, that the world is not chaotic. There is an order to it, a natural order to it. And that order we call Dharma. The world order is Dharma, which is that by which the universe is upheld. Comes from the root Dharyate, something that binds something, holds something together. Without Dharma, it would fall to pieces and dissolve into nothingness. But this is not possible, for though there is disorder, a Dharma, it exists and can exist only locally for a time and in particular parts of the whole. And that's how we see the world being constructed. And that's how the earlier question is there, which essentially can be categorized as faith and fear. And both are products of a way of canalizing our energy, which we call thought, a psychic prana called thought. So Order, however, will and from the nature of things must ultimately assert itself. And this is the meaning of the saying that righteousness or dharma prevails. This is in the nature of things. For dharma is not a law imposed from without by some celestial czar, some ruler. It is the nature of things, that which constitutes them. And it is the expression of their true being and can only cease to be when they themselves cease to be. Belief in righteousness is then in something not arbitrarily imposed from without by a lawgiver, but belief in a principle of reason which all people can recognize for themselves if they will. So this is in great contrast to the fundamental Semitic view that there is a lawgiver giving a law. Here we say nature itself evolves the law, and the law is to assert harmony in the midst of disharmony, or wherever that disharmony is there, because negative entropy will win at the end of the day. As opposed to a materialist point of view that will say, no, it's all doom and gloom. There must be chaos at the end of the day. And no doubt there is chaos. We can call it a dharma, if you will. But it is a cyclical thing where dharma always gets the upper hand eventually. You can put it as satyam eva jyati. Truth alone ultimately will triumph. Again, dharma is not only the law of each being, but necessarily also of the whole, and expresses the right relations of each part to the whole. This whole is again harmonious, otherwise it would dissolve. The principle which holds it together as one mighty organism is dharma. The particular dharma calls for such recognition and action in accordance therewith. Religion, therefore, which etymologically means that which obliges or binds together, is in its most fundamental sense the recognition that the world is an order of which man being and thing is a part, and to which each man stands in definite established relation. What a wonderful definition of religion. Now, today, there's so much debate against religion or about religion. It's one of two things that is unwise, so they say, to discuss: religion and politics. But here, religion means the same everywhere. The thing that binds and gives order. And so to interpret in English the word dharma as religion is correct. But then there's the misunderstanding that goes with this religion, because it's interpreted as some institutional organizational structure that imposes doctrines and dogmas on a person, rather than the authentic meaning, where something is bound not by doctrines and dogmas, but by a sense of order and harmony that has to win out eventually. And so that means that whether we believe in a God or not, there's an inherent sense of balance within us, an objective morality that is recognized universally. So he says, together with action based on and consistent with such recognition and in harmony with the whole cosmic activity, and whilst therefore the religious man is he who feels that he is bound in varying ways to all being, the irreligious man is he who egoistically considers everything from the standpoint of his limited self and its interests, without regard for his fellows or the world at large. In short, the assertion of egoistic selfishness based on this misunderstanding of our own identity. Who are we? And the incarnation does not have this misunderstanding. The essentially irreligious character of such an attitude is shown by the fact that if it were adopted by all, it would lead to the negation of the cosmos. That is, there would be chaos. We can see that easily. If everybody asserts their selfishness in any context, if people don't have any kind of sense of good citizenship and they wish to be antisocial, then the whole thing becomes chaotic. It's common sense. Therefore, all religions are agreed in the essentials of morality and hold that selfishness, in its wider sense, is the root of all sin, and is using a language like that and putting in brackets adharma. What is sin? It's adharma, going against the harmony of things. Morality is thus the true nature of man. The general dharma, samanya dharma, is the universal law governing all, just as the particular dharma, that is, vishesha dharma, varies with and is particular to each class of being. There's an objective and a subjective aspect to it. It follows from what is above stated that disharmony is suffering inevitably. It's a wonderful, wonderful explanation. And so therefore, what is Hinduism? The first thing that can be told is, we believe in dharma. We believe in orderliness. We believe that the universe is intrinsically striving toward it, and it is based on causal factors. And thought is part of the causal factor, the primary causal mover. And so it's good not to kill somebody, but it's even better not to think about killing somebody. In the morning, when the mind is not occupied with anything, brushing the teeth, and the mind allowed in an indisciplined way to wander where it will, it'll drag up all the impressions from the unconscious mind, resentment, grudges, hatred. And before you know it, you'll pick on one person in your office who insulted you or humiliated you or took credit for something you may have done. And then you're starting to internally plot their murder by putting arsenic in their coffee without intending to do it, but fantasizing on the delightful prospect of the person, of a payback on that person. Well, there's not much difference between that and the act of purchasing the arsenic and doing it. It's only a condensed version of it. It's only a gross version of it. But the problem is this. You've just started by that reverie of thinking, a process against yourself, because you're part of the whole. You've forgotten the holistic dimension of this way of thinking. And you have consciously decided that you will be subject to somebody harming you. And before you know it, the following day, a tummy upset, food poisoning, something like that, vomiting. Don't be surprised about it. If you trace it back, find out where its seed was planted, what its origins were, it was your plot, seemingly innocently developed while brushing your teeth, and the mind was not disciplined or steered in any way. A wild horse, allowed to go where it please. Wrong conduct is productive of ill, as right conduct is productive of good. As a man sows, so he will reap. There is an immanent justice. Then he says, but these results, though they may appear at once, do not always do so. The fruit of no action is lost. It must, according to the law of causality, which is a law of reason, bear effect. If its author does not suffer for it here and now in the present life, you do so in some future one. Because if there's a law of causality, it shouldn't end when the body goes. It should continue. And so we have now a basis for continuing our adventure in the afterlife. something that we call reincarnation. Birth and death mean the creation and destruction of bodies. The spirits so embodied are infinite in number and eternal. The material universe comes and goes. And this in Brahmanism, as he calls it, or Hinduism, has been said. This is the Sanatana Vaidika Dharma. And it is said to be the systole, the diastole of one universal heart, itself at rest, the moveless play of consciousness. The appearance and disappearance of the universe is the nature of svabhava, of that which is ultimately is. Its immediate cause is desire. And in Buddhism, that desire is called Trishna, but it's the same thing. Krishna is more evocative of something that is a thirst, a passion. So desire or thirst for world enjoyment is the universe of form. It is how the universe came to be. The Lord desiring, see how it's put in the Upanishads, looking around and desiring a second. The story tells us that the Lord looking around, saying, is there anybody there? Anybody there? Nobody there? Let me make a second. That's how the story goes. Each embodied soul or Jivatma will be reborn and reborn into the world until it is free from all desire. That's the pattern of it. Because order has to be restored. Dharma has to win. This involves the doctrine of reincarnation. These multiple births and deaths in the transmigratory worlds are called samsara. And samsara actually really means wandering around. Imagine now that you have a leave of absence from work and you have no plan to go anywhere and you're completely undecided and you spend your whole time wandering around, and wandering in a certain sense, in a thought sense, wondering in a questioning sense, what is it all about, and never coming to a conclusion. Aimlessly, that's the point. Well, most people are like that, wandering around from here and there, going from place to place, like a vagabond, not knowing where they're going, purposelessly moving about. It's no wonder that materialist atheists come to a conclusion. There's no purpose in life, because no central purpose is delineated in the material system, since everything is as a result of chaos. That means randomness. Now that's a difficulty. It's a difficulty in philosophy. It is a difficulty for the Sankhya school. It is a difficulty for the Vaisheshika school. And here I have to mention, you see, Vedanta is based on Prasthana Traya. It consists of Upanishads, Brahma Sutras, and Bhagavad Gita. It is the Brahma Sutras that organizes the thought. In the second segment, if you like, or part of the Brahma Sutras, there are convincing arguments against certain positions that don't make any metaphysical sense when you examine them closely. One of them would be the Sankhya position, since the Sankhya's are so close to the Vedantins, that if you can raise objections to what the Sankhya's hold and do it through a system of nyaya, a system of logic, and make sure that you defeat those arguments, that being so close to the Vedantic position, you'll have defeated all the other radical things, such as those held in by the Buddhas, and that is the Buddhists, and those held by the Jains, and those held by the Vaisheshikas, and so on. So anyway, this fundamental materialist point of view that nature, which is intrinsically insentient, is self-caused, doesn't hold water, since there is a purpose involved, a design involved, at the end of it, an intelligence involved. You may be tempted to even use the term intelligent design. Well, you can't get that from nothing. A spider's web can be poked. But where did it come from? It came from a very active, sentient, conscious spider. You poke a spider, it'll run. You poke a web, it just bounces. That's the difference. So all of these things are intricately dealt with in this Brahma Sutras. The world is a dvandva, that is a composite of happiness and suffering, a dualism of happiness and suffering. Happiness of a transitory kind may be had therein by adherence to dharma, in following in desire, the means to desire, and following lawful desires. These are the four aims of life. These are three of them. These constitute what is called the Trivarga, or the Purushartha, or three aims of sentient being. But just as desire leads to manifestation in form, so desireless leads away from it. Those who reach this state, they seek freedom, which is the fourth aim, moksha, or nirvana, as the Buddhists might have it. Purushartha is a state of bliss beyond the worlds of changing forms. And so that leads to a second principle. What is the aim of life? The aim of life is freedom. Freedom from the wandering. Freedom from a wheel that has a set pattern and we can't get out of it because it is this duality of pain and pleasure, of good and evil, of happiness and sorrow. So it goes on like that. You're seeing the time here, 11:51, 10 more minutes, which I reserve for elaboration from you and other questions. But just to complete the picture, so we have, what I say to Hindus is, firstly, as opposed to the other dharmic religions, Buddhism, Jainism, and so on, these are heterodoxical. The Hindus would believe in the authority of the Vedas. And that is why Swami Vivekananda maintained this word Hindu as a geographic term applied to a religion is more accurately called either the Vedic religion or Vedanta. He preferred the word Vedanta. That's why we have Vedanta societies everywhere. And so the first principle is, yes, we believe in the authorities of the Vedas as revealed truths from those who saw them by direct perception. And that refers then to a general method. That is the only method, direct perception. Direct perception in all systems, in all logical systems, would be a necessary requisite for proof or evidence. Then, of course, there is a supreme principle. And then this third one, which we have mentioned, there is dharma. The seeming nature is eternal and runs on a causal relationship of sowing and reaping. And this is essential. It is not that there was a lawgiver independent and outside it. And so we believe that the essential entity in you is either one or connected with that supreme principle. Because if something is changing, purely on logic, if something is changing, some changeless entity must be there. If something is a field in front, there must be a final datum of observation that sits there and doesn't move. So one person mentioned, on the basis of one of our talks here, whether we had read this Drishta. Yes, of course. Naturally, that's what I was referring to. So this idea that there's a perceiver and a perceived, a knower and a known, is a necessary thing in all our perceptions. The world doesn't exist unless three things are there: a perceiver, the thing perceived, and the capacity to close the gap through knowledge or perception itself. To make this distinction is logically possible, but it requires catching the emotions up to it. And that is what is called religious practice or yoga. And principally, to rally around the feelings, the emotional aspects of it, primarily using the emotions as the easiest route to do it. We call this bhakti yoga. All right.
Somebody, I have a question. So when we were talking about dharma as a way or as the route to orderliness, or at least that's what I understood you say. As dharma as a route to orderliness, it's, I don't know, it almost feels to me like chaos is bad. But it can't be, but that's not always true, is it? Because too much order is also bad. And I resonated more with the concept of harmony, or because I don't know, sometimes I feel like sometimes we can get stuck if there's too much order, and the chaos pretty much is a destruction of the order, which makes space for something to grow. And I resonated more with the concept of harmony between order and chaos, but can you please elaborate on it? Or how, yeah.
All right. It reminds me of a person who is in their office. There are papers everywhere on the desk, piles of paper, and you ask them, can you find anything here? And they'll say, when I'm away, don't disturb anything. I know where everything is. Actually, they don't. They just know where the pile is, and then they have to work through it, you see. So here's the thing. We have to avoid the mistake of categorizing things as good or bad from a kind of rewards punishment point of view. I put it that way. So what is necessary in this whole universe is dharma and adharma. This world doesn't move without asymmetry. So asymmetry is necessary. That is the nature of the world itself. But what is the position? How does everything hold together? Let's put it this way. How do the galaxies spin? How does this earth rotate? How is it at the same distance from the sun so that no particular area gets roasted? How does a tree know how to grow from a seed? Seed must be there, but prior to a seed, something else must have been there. The whole potentiality of it must have been there, and then contained in the seed. And from the seed, evolving out a tree with full tree necessary in the seed. There is a certain orderliness in this, and you cannot change it. Let's give you another radical example. I wake up in the morning, look in the mirror, and decide this face should be changed. It would be much better, and it would be much better looking if I took this nose and stitched it on the back of my head instead. So it might be a good idea. I might have thought out of the engineering, biological engineering of it, although I can't fathom how it would work or why I would think of doing it. Nevertheless, it's not going to happen. It's not designed in this way. Theoretically, a yogi has the potential to change the entire world. But I can assure you, no matter how much yogic power somebody has, changing the sun and moon's position is not possible. It is not designed like that. So we cannot upset the rhythm and order of things. That will win out. There's a certain movement toward negative entropy. You use engineering terms or physics terms, you'll have to say negative entropy. What is negative entropy? Well, I sustain this physical life through it. Eating and drinking sustains it. It sustains the complexity and order of it. Now I can upset that order, of course, but it's not in my favor. And it's not in anybody's favor to upset that. Now, if you're talking of chaos in a different sense, that there has to be some movement against it. There has to be a dharma. Yes, absolutely, there has to be. There has to be a contrast. There has to be light and shade. There has to be pain and pleasure. But it's all within the realm of samsara, no doubt. But the overriding thing that will win out is orderliness, will be there. So this is all put in Vedic mythology. It is put out as Indra and his constant enemy. There's an interesting version of Vedic physics. Let's see if I can catch it. Where there's this constant struggle. And it's put also, of course, as the devas and the asuras all fighting together. But what is it? Well, on the one side, gravity is fighting against electrical energy. The wish for things to fall together and be unified is being combated by electrical energy that wants to fly off. Vedic physics. Just get the book. So there is this constant battle, and Hindu mythology portrays it pretty well. Let's see if I can catch the glossary of it. Oh, okay, here it is. Yes. No. Well, of course, we get this understanding in physics, matter and antimatter also. As soon as something is created in a laboratory, a virtual particle, it's called, another virtual particle comes, crashes into it, and annihilates it. So that's the nature of nature itself, no doubt. It's beautiful. In terms, therefore, of applying it to moral life, however, let me just bring this. Vedic cosmology. Scientific glossary, that'll do it. Yes. So there's a book that I'm just referring to now called Vedic Physics. It presents a very convincing article that the Samhita portion of the Vedas, which is dismissed as some nonsense by many people, actually has cosmology and physics within it, but symbolized in various terms. Agni, for example, that is prime deity, is the opening of the Rig Veda, praises this deity, Agni, actually means energy. Antariksha really means the atmosphere. Apaha, which normally would be translated as water, really represents matter and antimatter. And then, I keep losing the place here. Anybody know how to handle a Kindle efficiently? Okay, let's move on. Right. So, Madhu normally will translate into honey, but Madhu actually means magnetic field. When you study it, when you put it in the context and assume that it is referring to advanced physics. Mitra will literally mean a friend. That would represent a proton. And Vritra is the constant enemy of Indra. So Vritra portrayed as a demon, is actually surface tension. Surface tension, and that is fighting against Indra. Indra is electric force. Anyway, all of this is in the context of this constant attempt to restore dharma all the time, to restore harmony all the time. And we can see that as a cosmic balancing power as well in the avatara idea, that the cosmic balancing power comes to restore dharma. Antisocial activity is adharma. That's on the moral spectrum of things. It's a game. You have to take it as a game. There must be two antagonistic forces fighting together. We won't take it, with a sense of guilt. We take it as a fact of life, that's the way this universe plays. You have to have these two antagonistic forces all the time. But harmony will always rule or win, because if it doesn't, the whole thing gets destroyed. Everything will get destroyed. All right. Leave it there. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.